Hello, my name is Jeremy, just your average everyday guy. That is until sometime in my early 30s, I developed a spinal condition known as ankylosing spondylitis. It took me from this, 6 foot tall, to this, not 6 foot tall. But I wasn't going to let that get me down forever, so eventually I kicked some bad habits and started fighting back. I still get some pretty strange looks, but I'm now doing what I love, traveling and adventuring. My goal is to show other people with disabilities or anyone facing challenges that your best days don't have to be behind you and that there's always hope. So thanks for joining me, the Handicapped Hiker.
On the last episode, I hiked 2 separate loop trails around Devil's Tower National Monument, followed by a quick drive through the south unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. Then, after 2 long days of driving east, I finished up the first leg of this trip with scenic cruises of Apostle Islands National Lakeshore in Wisconsin and Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. After some much-needed downtime during a 3-week intermission, I'm packing up and preparing to hit the road again.
Poncho, mosquito repellent, camp chair, trekking poles, cane, first aid kit. Using a smaller cooler this time. There's some more totes with snacks and canned goods. Bed with a sleeping bag, a tent just in case we need it, pillow. These are window covers. They just simply stick on with Velcro. Totes full of soup cans, and rice mixes, canned potatoes, canned tomatoes, lots of bug repellent. Sunscreen. Got my morning kickstarts, chips and snacks and bins, carry-on camera bag. Okay, so I wanted to leave this morning between 6:30 and 6:45. It is exactly 6:45, so can't complain about that. So here we go. Went through the house 4 or 5 times, checked all the windows, checked all the thermostats, made sure everything was turned off. I got all my valuables out of the house before I left. So I'm feeling pretty safe about leaving. As far as leaving the house goes. The goal is east. So for the next 4 weeks, we are on the Great Northeast Trip. lot different than the last time I was here.
Here's my first stop, Kinzua Bridge State Park, just east of Allegheny National Forest. This place is only a few hours from where I grew up, so I've been here a handful of times as a child. But back then, the bridge was fully intact, still in use, and this visitor center wasn't here yet. The trail leading from the parking lot to the Skywalk observation deck is completely accessible in about a half-a-mile round trip. When originally built in 1882, it was the longest and tallest railroad structure in the world at 2,053 feet long and 301 feet high. The current bridge was built in 1900 and was named a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark in 1982. At the time restoration began in 2002, it was the fourth tallest railroad bridge in the United States. But in 2003, a tornado struck and toppled more than half of the span's structure. Since I've only been on the treadmill for the past few weeks, I'm going to punish myself with the first mountainside trail of this trip. The Kinzua Bridge Trail is 1 mile total out and back, with a deceiving 308 feet of elevation gain. Having an engineering background myself, this was, and still is, an incredible sight to see. Most structural failures are not caused by faulty design, but more often from poor maintenance and botched inspections. This structure might have stood another 100 years, but the bolts tying it to the concrete foundation piers were badly rusted out. The only thing keeping this bridge in place was gravity. And it doesn't take an engineer to know that gravity doesn't do well with lateral forces, such as horizontal winds.
Whole big old bridge for this tiny little creek.
The remaining upright portion of the bridge was strengthened and reopened as a skywalk and observation deck in 2011. The collapsed ruins remain as they fell, serving as an exhibit showcasing the astonishing forces of nature.
So last time I was here, they were still running trains across this bridge. Some friends and I walked all the way across it and hiked all the way back down the ravine below the bridge. Wow. And that's where we were earlier, all the way up there. All this iron and steel just wrinkled and bent like nothing. Back up we go. The fun part.
That was a good visit, and I'm glad I finally got to see it since the collapse. It's definitely worth a visit, and if you're not from the area, there are many other trip-worthy attractions in the surrounding region. Up next is a slight detour north to a waterfall I've wanted to see for quite some time. This is Chestnut Ridge Park, near Orchard Park, New York, a suburb of Buffalo. The Eternal Flame Falls Trail is 1.2 miles total out and back, with 134 feet of elevation gain. Although there isn't much water today, this is still really cool to see. This flame, in a small void behind the waterfall, is fed by natural gas emitting from within the earth. And despite the name, Eternal Flame Falls, occasionally it needs to be relit.
Not much water, but still pretty cool.
Who would have thought? Fire and water coexisting together in the same place. I feel like there's probably a lesson in that. Let's move along. And as if these two locations weren't enough for the first day of this trip, I'm going to continue east, check into the campground, then visit Letchworth State Park, near the Finger Lakes region of New York.
Now, how's this for a campsite? I am way back in the rustic tent sites. And I and one other camper are the only people camping in this campground tonight. I am way back here in the back, in the woods, all by myself. No other campers around anywhere. Look at this. Look at that view. This is what I like. Seclusion, your campsite surrounded by trees. So even if someone was camping in the next site, you still have some trees between you. You know, enough woods for privacy, where you're not practically sitting next to their fire, listening to their conversation. I hate camping like that. This is what I like. And on top of that, a view. All right, well, let's go hit Letchworth.
Letchworth State Park, about 60 miles southeast of Buffalo, follows a 17-mile stretch of the Genesee River. Most notable for its deep river gorge and 3 main waterfalls, there are also 66 miles of hiking trails, as well as biking, horseback riding, camping, rafting, kayaking, and even hot air ballooning. In 2015, Letchworth was named the best state park in the country, which I might argue, but it is deserving as one of the best state parks for sure. The river gorge reaches 550 feet high in some places, and is often referred to as the Grand Canyon of the East. Again, it's a great park and a beautiful place to visit, but any comparison to the real Grand Canyon in Arizona is a stretch. About a 5,000-foot stretch. But you should see both if you can. If not, there's probably a handsome, brave, hardworking, funny guy that made YouTube videos of both that you can check out. Just saying. Let's kick things off with the Gorge Trail. This is a 13.9-mile trail out and back with 2,234 feet of elevation gain. But don't get excited. I'm only doing 1.5 miles from the south end down past the Middle Falls, then back up.
Going back up is a little rougher than going down. Whew. It's definitely day one.
Now I'm going to try hiking another portion of this trail to the lower falls.
Okay, as you can see, there is a stone bridge down there across the river. Unfortunately, we are not going to make it down there today. I am just whooped.
After a long, action-packed day one, I'm running out of steam and daylight, so I'm just going to play it safe and head back to the campground. The lower falls will just have to wait for a future trip. It got dark very fast, and I ended up making dinner in the dark with only battery-powered lanterns. And as much as I love this campsite, it got really eerie back here on this ridgeline in the dark, all alone, with sticks breaking all around. It was probably just deer, but it made for an uneasy night's sleep. Early the next morning, lucky to have survived whatever cryptids I was sleeping amongst, I'm ready to continue east to another place I visited as a child, but not since. Watkins Glen State Park, in the fittingly named village of Watkins Glen, New York, sitting at the south end of Seneca Lake. Opened to tourism in 1863, it became a state park in 1906. Today, it's the most popular of the state parks in the Finger Lakes region. In 2015, it came in third place for best state park in the country, right behind Porcupine Mountains Wilderness in Michigan and nearby Letchworth, which you might have heard of. This park is mostly known for its narrow gorge, with 200-foot cliff walls and 19 stunning waterfalls. I'm taking the most popular Glen Creek Gorge Trail, which is 2.2 miles total out and back with 492 feet of elevation gain. The railroad bridge that stood here before this one washed away in the historic flood of 1935. After receiving nearly 12 inches of rain in a 48-hour period, the rivers and streams of the entire South Finger Lakes region became inundated. Trees and debris piled up behind the bridge's middle supports until finally breaking loose and sending a wall of water and debris, bridge and all, roaring down through the gorge, destroying much of the town below. At the turnback point, I'm adding the 180 stone steps of Jacob's Ladder, making this a 3-mile hike with a grand total of 832 stone steps, each way. I had more stops planned for day 2, but I overdid it on day 1, so I'm just going to end the day early at the KOA near Cooperstown, New York. It's hard to believe we're only 2 days into this trip, but there's still plenty ahead, including a really big challenge coming up soon. So be sure to tune in for the next episode, and we'll see you then.